Hi folks, Nathan here with a little bit of an update on some legislation that has been moving through the legislature on charter schools. AB 84 is a bill that's gotten a lot of attention, so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Welcome to the Frontline with FPM, where we talk about California politics, homeschool freedom, parental rights, and the family. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce, and thanks for joining us today. Let's jump right in and see what's going on here on the Frontline. All right, so AB 84 is a bill that has been moving through the legislature, and it has changed several times. There is a lot of energy going into this bill in terms of how it needs to be written or how it should not be written, things from multiple sides and perspectives on how this bill is going to impact education in our state. And it has a lot of different people behind the different aspects of this bill. So there are people that are talking about concerns about how charter schools are misusing government funds. There are accusations of charter schools inventing or making up students, of falsifying information about students. Other people from other perspectives are saying that in general, charter schools are using funds for things they shouldn't be allowed to use, and there are loopholes in the law. People from other perspectives are talking about how this bill is going to damage the education that's provided by charter schools. And all this to say, there's a lot of different invested people and invested groups that are talking about this bill, that are engaged in the process with this particular bill. Now, one thing I do want to make clear is that this bill is a bill that addresses charter schools, public charter schools in the state of California, which is not something that we at Family Protection Ministries typically get involved in. So I'm addressing this because of how we've gotten a ton of questions on this bill, and there's a lot of folks that are concerned about not just how this bill will impact folks in charter schools, but also folks that are in private homeschooling. And how will it affect them, and will it be a situation where they come after us next? And I've dealt with this a little bit previously in the podcast, where we've talked about the issue of funding and how funding attached to some program automatically causes the government to have a greater interest in how that program runs. If the government funds it, the government wants to know how the funds are being used and hold that program accountable. Now, this happens at a variety of levels, to a variety of degrees with various programs. But this is an area where not only does the folks in government, in the legislature or in the Department of Education, not only are they interested in holding accountable these programs for the funds that they use, but there's other groups that are interested in making sure that charter schools are held accountable for how they use their money. Now, for example, organizations like, say, the CTA, for example, the California Teachers Association, they would be interested in how charter schools use their funds because they have a financial vested interest in how the traditional public school system receives their funds. And if the Department of Education is taking money in this big pie of money that goes to education, and there are a certain percentage of money that's going from the public schools and coming away from the traditional public schools and going to charter schools, then that's an area where the folks that are responsible for some of the folks that are in the traditional public campus schools, like teachers, for example, that are part of the Teachers Association, they would be interested in making sure that as little as possible the money goes out of the typical public school pot of money and and goes to charter schools. They don't want to see that happen. Folks that are involved in the traditional public school system want to see as much money as possible stay in the traditional public school system, because every ounce of money that goes out of that pot of money and goes over to some program like a charter school or a non-classroom based charter school specifically, that money then isn't available to be used for projects or for paying teachers' salaries within the traditional public school system. So there's people coming at this from a whole bunch of different ways. And folks might be saying, hey, we should hold accountable all that money that's going over here to the charter school system and tighten down on that so that maybe we can get some money and pull it back towards the traditional public school system. Now that's one aspect of this that's happening. But there's other aspects of it too, folks that are in the charter schools that are legitimately trying to pull together a system of education and educational programs in these schools that maybe have more local control than has been traditional, maybe have more parent involvement than has been in the traditional public schools, maybe have more local community involvement in those charter schools. So when you look at the big picture, there's so many different elements to this bill, and it has been changed a number of times. I'm not going to get into the specific details of all the different changes that are going on with this bill, but you should know that there's a lot going on with it. There's a lot of different invested parties in this bill. But at the end of the day, when you look at the amounts of money that they're talking about here, there's definitely an interest of the government to have accountability for that money that's being spent. Now, accountability can look a lot of different ways, and there can be accountability in name, but it doesn't really work out to practically be accountability. It's actually changes to the law and changes to how the vision will play out in charter schools. But that being aside, I want to talk for a minute about private education versus public education, and specifically the concern of parents that are privately homeschooling. Will this bill affect them, or will the next step for the legislature be to come after private homeschoolers because of what's going on with this bill? So I want to address that briefly. And before I get into that, though, I want to show you some of the clips from the California State Legislature from the floor discussion in the California State Assembly as they discussed AB 84. There's some folks that are arguing for the bill, some folks that are arguing against the bill, some folks that are saying, hey, I'm going to vote for it, but there's still some problems with it. And there's a lot of back and forth. You can see a full video of the floor session on our website. We'll link to that full session of the floor discussion on AB 84. But here are some highlights, just some clips on some of the back and forth, some of the speeches that have been given on AB 84 in the California State Legislature on this topic before it got passed out of the Assembly into the Senate, where it's now sitting and waiting for a committee assignments. So here's those clips.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to present Assembly Bill 84, a bill to strengthen charter school oversight and accountability, to crack down on charter schools engaging in fraud and abuse of taxpayer dollars to enrich charter school operators. Let me first of all acknowledge what I've heard through my conversations with many of you on the floor, as well as from many of my conversations with charter school parents. There are good charter schools that provide choice for students and parents in many communities throughout our state to meet their unique educational needs. I have personally visited many good charter schools, and I completely respect the desire of students and parents who want to pursue the best educational opportunities for their families. Unfortunately, in recent years, we have seen a series of high-profile cases involving bad actors who have figured out how to enrich themselves by taking advantage of lax charter school oversight. In 2021, the operators of the A3 charter school network based in San Diego County were criminally convicted and sentenced to prison for defrauding California taxpayers of over $400 million of K-12 public education dollars. This network of 19 online charter schools were buying Little League rosters to get children's personal information to enroll them in their schools without the knowledge of the children and their families to, again, enrich themselves with the state's student attendance-based education funding. Last year, I joined my colleagues from San Diego and from Morro Bay to request the state auditor invest the Highlands Community Charter Schools based here in Sacramento County after whistleblowers reported to the local ABC News that charter school operators were engaging in attendance fraud, again to obtain state attendance-based education funding. The state auditor is currently investigating the allegations of the use of public education funds for luxury staff trips to Europe and Hawaii, luxury gifts like iPhones for students and staff, and hundreds and thousands of dollars in bonuses given to school staff. And just last week, the San Diego Union Tribune reported that the elite academic academy charter schools, which serves just 1,800 mostly homeschool students, have been paying millions of dollars a year to a corporation created by the elite academy's founder, where the corporation's sole source of revenue are the elite charter schools, and the corporation employs family members with salaries in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like many homeschool charters, Elite also provides every student up to $3,700 in vouchers using Proposition 98 public education dollars, where these vouchers are being spent on religious and private school tuition, tickets to Dodgers and Padres baseball games, tickets to Universal Studios, Knott's Berry Farm, and ski resorts. Following these scandals, the state imposed a moratorium on so-called non-classroom-based charters and tasked the Legislative Analyst's Office and the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, or FCMAT, the state's school fiscal oversight agency, to make recommendations on strengthening charter school oversight. The state controller also convened a task force to make recommendations toward the same goal. This bill seeks to codify the recommendations made by the LAO, FCMAT, and the state controller. I have had the opportunity to discuss this bill with many of you, and my staff and I have met at least 6 times with the opposition. And I wanted to acknowledge what I have heard from many of you on this floor, which is that we all want to crack down on the fraud and abuse of tax dollars, but we also don't want the unintended consequences of hurting good charter schools that are using public education dollars responsibly to deliver real, meaningful educational services and programs for the students. To this end, I have taken significant amendments already to address 3 of the top 3 concerns identified by the Charter School Association. The amendments are, 1, to delete the proposed up to 30% reduction in funding for virtual education programs and to go back to the existing funding formula and process. That's what most of us have been hearing about. 2, to delete the proposed increase on charter oversight fees and to go back to the existing 1% cap on oversight fees. And 3, to delete the proposed requirement for charter school administrators and school counselors to hold an appropriate education credential. Now let me make this clear. This bill is still a work in progress. I hope I have demonstrated my commitment to each and every one of you to continue to work with stakeholders and all of you to ensure that we crack down on bad actor charter schools while not hurting the good charter schools. I have committed to the member from San Mateo to delete the provisions related to school district receiverships. I have committed to the member from Merced to work to address the issue of small district authorizers, and I will commit to continue to work with all of you on further amendments necessary to address remaining concerns. I have also committed to working with the author of the charter school-sponsored Senate bill to reconcile our differences. I want to thank my colleague from Colton, who is a joint author of this measure, who will share his personal experience as a career educator, where he has personally witnessed much of this charter school fraud and corruption. And I want to thank the speaker for supporting this discussion
30 seconds.
to ensure that our K-12 public education tax dollars are being properly spent on public education. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
There is an attack on charter schools. They want to destroy charter schools in California. Who are they? The education bureaucrats that have failed our children time and time and time again, but who give immense contributions to political campaigns and have a lot of sway. We need to put our children first. I hear a lot of talk about, but the children. What do we do about the children on this bill or that bill? And I'm rising in support of a bill to take care of the children. This bill will hurt children, full stop. You know it, and I know it. How many children? I'm going to give you the figure. 725,693 children enrolled today in charter schools will be hurt by this bill. And the sinister agenda that is behind this bill. Why the attack on charter schools? Well, isn't it obvious? The failed education bureaucracy doesn't like to be embarrassed by better competition. Charter schools are innovators. They take the flexibility that we offer, because they are public schools, but they are given flexibilities to customize, to innovate, and to be accountable. For a charter school, no parent has to send their child to a charter school. They choose to. A choice of a parent who loves their child and wants what's best. They're choosing to send their children to charter schools. Why is this bill being offered to destroy charter schools? Not just because of the competition, but because of money. Follow the money. In California, we reimburse school districts based on attendance. In 2014, there were 6.2 million students enrolled in California public schools, charter and traditional. That has dropped to 5.8 million in 2024. Why? Because the policies of the state driving families out of the state in record numbers. But also a lot of parents are choosing to take their children home and do homeschooling because they don't trust the education bureaucracy. I'm not assuming they're going to private schools because the cost of living is so high here. Sadly, most parents don't have that option that the rich and privileged do in this state because they have competition because they've got money. 78% of parents say that they want a charter option, according to the Charter Schools CCSA poll. And guess what? Even though we've had a decline in enrollment, the percentage of students enrolled in a charter school has gone from 8.7% in 2014 to 12.5%. Again, these are all choices being made by parents who love their children. I am imploring each of you who have children, and I know that you love your children, you would do what is ever necessary in the best interest of your child. I know that. Then why aren't you allowing other parents to do the same? If you pass this bill, you kill charter schools, and that is the intent. LA Unified last year decided to take the facilities, which, by the way, with declining enrollment, there are a lot of empty classrooms, a lot of empty facilities that LA Unified has. But they said, no more facilities for charter schools. And their board voted to penalize, to discriminate against charter schools. Why? Not because of fraud. That's the window dressing put on this bad bill, but because they want to kill charter schools, as this bill also is intended to do. The author
30 seconds.
The author cites amendments. I would argue that if the intent is to improve oversight of charter schools in all schools, let's pump the brakes. Let's go to a more deliberative process. This is not based upon curing any ills of bad actors. This is based on a broad brush attack on charter schools. You know it, I know it, parents know it, of these 700,000 plus kids. And let me remind you, all those parents, they will vote and they will tell their friends.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with the utmost respect to my colleague of Torrance that I rise today in opposition of Assembly Bill 84. I understand and appreciate the intent behind this legislation. There are without question bad actors in every sector, and we must have strong, fair policies to ensure accountability. However, even with the amendments, this bill overreaches and ends up penalizing schools that are acting in good faith and providing critical services to students who need them most. My district is unique. It spans 11 counties and 27,000 square miles, nearly 20% of the entire state. In many of my rural communities, transportation is limited or simply unavailable. Harsh winters and high elevation passes often isolate entire regions in winter months. For families in these areas, access to education can mean traveling more than 100 miles one way. That's why there are 37 charter schools in my district serving students who would otherwise fall through the cracks in the traditional public school system. These schools exist because conventional options simply cannot meet the unique needs of our rural students. Many face transportation difficulties, medical conditions, disabilities, or simply thrive only in non-traditional learning environments. Non-classroom-based charter schools offer tailored educational models that meet students where they are. As someone who served nearly 5 years as board president of a local charter school and who had the opportunity to homeschool my own children during that time, I've seen firsthand the transformative power of these institutions. These schools are not just filling gaps in my district, they are excelling. Many students graduate not only with their high school diploma, but with AA degrees, ready to enter the workforce and higher education. AB 84 would significantly cut funding for these schools, undermining educational opportunities and access across my district. We already have no CSU or UC presence in my 11 counties. We have 4 counties that don't even have a community college, and now this bill threatens to remove K-12 options that are holding our communities together. According to Public Policy Institute of California, my district is losing families and businesses at double the rate of urban areas. Our small towns are being hollowed out, largely because families are forced to leave in search of educational opportunities that no longer exist locally. We cannot continue to pass legislation that makes rural life unsustainable. This is not just a policy disagreement, it's a lifeline issue for my district. AB 84 threatens to dismantle the only viable educational options available to thousands of students in rural California. Those aren't theoretical consequences. They are real, immediately, and deeply personal to the families I represent. Stripping these resources would not just hinder access, it would erase it. For the students with no traditional pathway, for the families barely holding on, and for the communities fighting every day to survive and stay connected to opportunity. Let's ensure that every student in California, no matter where their zip code is, has access to the education they deserve. We talk about equity in this building almost every day, but if this bill passes, entire areas in my district won't survive. That's not equity for all, that's abandonment. And I cannot stay silent while my communities are left behind. I urge you to stand with them and vote no, or at the very least lay off on AB 84.
This conversation has made me wonder, are we looking at fraud and abuse, or are we going after non-classroom-based charter schools? Because I think, at least in my opinion, the initial premise of the bill was fraud that's occurring, within the charter school system, and the thing is, I have a lot of constituents benefiting from home-based charter schools, and I'll get into that in a second. But in my district, we are extremely blessed to have some of the best schools in the state, traditional public schools in the state. The districts are all amazing. We also have some of the best charter schools in the state. Still, given the best traditional schools, people still opt for those amazing charter schools. The traditional charter schools, or the traditional schools and the charter schools make each other better. And we're blessed to have both, and my children have attended both. During COVID, when our traditional public schools were closed, I took my kids to a terrific charter school, and they had definitely a different learning experience, and one that they got a lot from. But this bill, since this bill's been introduced, like all of you, and has been referenced by some of my colleagues, I've received hundreds of emails. This is number 2 in the number of emails I've received on any bill this session. But today, just today, even given the amendments didn't stop the emails from coming. And while some people might say, well, that's because they didn't know about the amendments or something like that, 2 of the sets of amendments struck me. One of them was 2 of the letters, really, obviously they knew about the amendments. One of them was from a group of superintendents and executive directors of charter schools in my district. They don't feel comforted by the amendments that were taken. They still have serious concerns about the operations of their charter schools, and these are amazing charter schools. You can look them up. One of them, which is, by the way, has a large non-classroom-based student population. About half of the students are going to college that just graduated this week. But another one really struck my mind, and this was referenced from one of my colleagues earlier, was a parent of a child with special needs, with a disability. And she's read the language, she sees what the language does, and with all due respect, I think she would actually disagree with a statement that more in-person education is what would be needed. Maybe that's true for some children, but I don't think that's accurate for all children or even her children. But she benefits based on the needs of her child from having a remote option for her child to attend and her child to thrive. And this bill is scaring those parents. And they've read the language and they don't think that the opportunities that they have now are going to exist under this measure. So I think we all agree. I've heard some of the cases, some of the charter schools. If we start listing, by the way, any government agency, waste, fraud, and abuse that occurs in the state, we could be here all day. I agree there is probably some abuse, and there have been identified horrendous cases that have happened throughout the state, and we should be there to regulate, just like we try to do that with all waste, fraud, and abuse that happens in this state. Billions of dollars that we know have been wasted in this state.
30 seconds.
And I'm not talking about conspiracies or anything like that. We know that this money has gone out, and we've had investigations as a result. But this is not the vehicle to do that. There is a vehicle in the Senate already that instills less fear on the charter schools and would bring accountability to ensure that the fraud is not occurring. We do need to eliminate that in every government agency. But this is going to take options away from our students that are best for those students to thrive in the state. With that, I ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the author for this bill and the continued effort to work to get this bill right. We've seen nearly daily amends in an effort to figure this out. And because of that, and because of the author's commitment to me to continue negotiation with the opposition on this bill, I will support it today. That being said, though, I need you to know that I support with reservations. You all have heard me talk about equity many times on this floor. I've talked about equity, meaning equity is arguably most important in education because we know that students, they all learn differently. I am all for diverse learning environments as long as they deliver for our kids. I have data from non-classroom based charters in my district that shows that they are delivering for our kids and have a very impressive educational outcomes, extremely impressive. Further, during my time at the San Diego County Office of Education, I saw firsthand how these schools they're key. They are essential for students with differing learning needs and also those that are facing life situations that truly require some flexibility, such as those that are returning back home, meaning these are the reentry students and also adult learners. I've also reached back out to various county offices of education, their staff and superintendents currently, and I have to say that they do agree that this is a good start. But they also agree that this bill still needs a lot of work to solve the problem that we're truly aiming to address. So again, I am supportive today purely because I trust the author to keep working on this issue and that he will bring back a bill that works for my district and the diverse learners. Because I'm telling you, I've gotten hundreds of calls, so many calls. And so I want to be clear. I am voting aye today, not for the bill, but I'm voting for the time for this conversation to keep going, to continue on in this conversation, and note that I will not be supportive of the bill if it's not fixed when it comes back from the Senate to this floor. So we need to make sure that we find some common ground with both sides. Finally, before I wrap up, I do want to talk a little bit about process. And I say this because I understand that some of the author's staff has been subject of threats due to their work on this particular bill. So when I hear about someone being threatened behind working on a bill, it's imperative that I speak up about that. And I say this, we can all disagree on issues, but we have to do so with the utmost respect. The threats and violence, it is never okay. To any stakeholders who have crossed the line, I ask that you stop and move forward with the utmost respect. Treat people the way that you want to be treated. And to any staff who has been threatened, I need you to know as a member that I see you, I hear you, and I support you 100%. I hope that this resonates with everybody who's working on this bill or any other bill that's coming forward. Let's agree to disagree, but let's do it with the utmost respect. Thank you.
All right, so now that we see a little bit of the back and forth, some of the discussion about AB 84, I want to clarify. AB 84 does not address private education, private schools, private homeschools, families that file their own private school affidavit, or families that are involved in their own private school satellite program where they teach their kids at home, but their kids are enrolled in a private school. So next, I want to talk about how does this bill impact them or not, and what's the next step here. So ultimately, this bill does not impact anything related to private schools. It affects charter schools, public charter schools, and how they're spending their money. And there's a lot of details in this bill about that. And again, they've changed a lot. However, some people are concerned that they're going to come after private school families next, private homeschool families. And the reason that I have addressed this before, but the reason that that's not really an issue here, and maybe in the long run, it could be overall in education policy that they go after certain things and they come after things in waves. That's generally true. They do address one thing and then they address something else. But this particular bill isn't going to trigger a bill to go after private Christian home education, because this bill is specifically talking about government funds and following up on government funds and how those government funds are being used. Many, many times we have seen bills that have addressed government funds and how they're being used in public charter schools. The same that we have seen them in those investigations leading to more legislation and regulation addressing that, coming to many other government programs, whether they be education programs or not. And so looking today at private homeschooling and whether that be impacted by this going after government funds being used in campus schools or in charter schools, whether that's going to affect private homeschool families. Right now, that's not the case because private homeschool families aren't taking that money, and they're not government isn't wanting to follow up on money that they sent to them. There is no trail there for the government to follow to make sure that their money is being used the right way. So let's let's be careful with how we refer to these things, but also acknowledge that there is safety in private education to an extent that's much broader than in the realm of the charter schools, the public charter schools, because public charter schools are taking government funds, and they will always be under the microscope when it comes to the government saying, hey, how is our money being used? Private homeschoolers don't have that issue. And as long as we don't take the government money, as long as they don't provide new programs that automatically feed funds to private homeschoolers, that will not be the issue. That will not be the reason why government will come after private homeschooling. And so we can be grateful for that that freedom that we have. That we're not going to be under that investigation, under that automatic system of more regulations and more oversight because of how money is being used, because we're not using their money. Now, an example of this is a few years ago, in 2019, there was a bill to mandate that every child's records, school records, be submitted to the state for a state computer system to control and manage every single education record for every single student in the state of California, including public school, public charter school, private homeschool, everybody, every student in the state. Now, there's a long story about my involvement in that particular bill to get private homeschool students out of the bill and all private schools out of the bill. But the bottom line was this. When the authors of that bill found out that we were not taking government funds, they originally thought that we were, and so that is why they wanted to mandate that all of our children have their records submitted to the state, to a state computer system. But when they found out we were not taking government funds, they realized that they shouldn't, they don't need to, and really they probably can't take our records and force us to submit our records to the state to that extent and to that detail. So looking ahead, that bill ultimately was amended to exclude all private education so that we wouldn't have to have our kids' records submitted to the state database. And eventually that bill was adopted by the state government, by the legislature, and by the governor in a behind-the-scenes, a closed-door meeting where they adopted a budget, and they included that bill in the budget several years ago. So that's state law now, and we are not included in that. So that's an example of how we have been able to, with lots of effort, we have been able to stay out of certain government oversight over overreach and government control over our own information, because we were not taking money the way the charter school students are taking money. So all that to say, I don't see us being attacked the same way or for the same reason as currently the charter schools are being under scrutiny for how money is being used. Now, you can read the bill, you can take more looks at what other folks are saying about AB 84, but that's sort of, I just wanted to give you sort of the big picture of why it's different for private homeschool families than it is for charter school families when it comes to this particular bill. Have you heard of our event that's happening at the Reagan Library? We have an event called Hold the Line, where we are talking about the importance of the freedom for private home education, the freedom of parents to make decisions for their own children, the concept of families having the right to make decisions for children, as opposed to the government taking over that authority and making decisions for children in spite of their parents. This event, Hold the Line, at Reagan Library on July 12th, is going to be an inspirational event. It will be a practical event that will help you to understand what you can do to make a difference and why we need to be fighting for our freedoms. This is a short event. It's only about an hour and a half long, but there's also some extra bonuses here. You will have access to the Reagan Library and the special Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit if you register with us before the tickets run out. So we have a limited number of tickets, and we'd love to see you there on July 12th. And if you're able to come, you'll get to participate in the learning about things that you can do to make a difference, as well as participate in the viewing of the whole museum and the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit that they have there currently. So there's a huge value here that that we're making available, and I would encourage you to check out the link below, the link on our website, to learn more about this event, what we're doing, and what's included. So hope to see you there. That's it for today. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again next time. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Front Line with FPM. For more information about the topics we discuss here, check out Family Protection Ministries at fpmca.org and subscribe to our channel.